So, we're here to look about availability and why is it more important than ever before.
So Keith, how do you define availability? What are the components that make up the available enterprise?
The key components that make up available enterprise are definitely around the people, the process and the infrastructure. If you have those in harmony, then you're going to have a situation where you're almost always on. Of course, you need to make sure all the things are lined up in order to be able to do that. And one of the questions I was going to ask you was, if I was on the other side, how do I build a business case for availability? Because some of the things are quite hard to grasp.
Yeah, it's been quite interesting talking to the CIOs about this issue and how people have been successful at building a business case for availability. I mean, the first and most important sort of argument is always around customers, focusing on customers, focusing on customer satisfaction, focusing on the effect on customers of having a loss of availability. There's also other aspects that can be included, like the cost of business downtime, and also effect on partners and things like that. But the real core is this argument about customer satisfaction and the competitive advantage that can grow from a highly available system.
So you can get a return on investment from having a good availability services program.
Absolutely, and we saw that from some of the most forward-thinking CIOs in this area, that they saw this very much as not just avoiding a cost, but both avoiding a cost if things go down, but also driving competitive advantage that generated sales, that led them to be able to exceed customer expectations and capture customers from their competitors and retain customers that might have otherwise left.
Yeah, I think we've seen some examples of that in a slightly different way. I think when people are looking at availability, they look at the processes they have in place to make sure they can be available quite quickly. I know from one of our own customers, part of what they had to do to make that was to change the way that they procured some of their hardware to have a standard so that they could recover quickly.
Oh.
Doing that actually meant that they reduced their costs of provision in the original case anyway. So I think there's lots of ways of getting return on investment for a good availability service.
Yeah, and so it's not just about avoiding some big cost or some big problem. It's also there's a strong upside. So looking at the advantages of this and the changing context can lead to a strong argument about return on investment.
Yeah. So that's the way you can get a good return on investment, I think, from that point of view.
So one of the interesting questions though that comes up around the calculating return on investment is the costs and the problems around legacy systems. I mean, what do you see as some of the solutions or approaches to dealing with this legacy?
Yeah, I think that is a challenge for CIOs because a lot of the more established companies do have legacy systems. I don't think it's so true for newer companies, because obviously they're coming in with digital savvy, so therefore they're there. But that's a challenge. It's not something you should push to the side. You can make availability a requirement of those legacy systems. You can do it. It's something you shouldn't shy away from. All right? Certainly our experience over the number of years we've been in availability says there are ways of doing that to make sure you get a good return on what you're trying to do. So I'd say the first thing is not to be afraid of it, to approach it, look at the legacy system, work out what you can do to make it as available as possible. Mm-hmm. There are techniques that you can use, and certainly some of the newer items that have come out will allow you to do that. So I think it's just a case of taking that challenge head on and facing it up and not being almost dismissive and say I can't do anything about it. With the newer systems, I think it's more a case of you should ingrain that in. I think that's the other thing we're seeing. With availability, it's a case of if you think about it from day one, then you can build it into your systems. So modern companies are actually taking systems and saying, I will make it available, I will design it to be available. And I think that is what's pushing people to look at their legacy systems as well. And to take away from it, it's not a case of I can't do it, it's a case of how can I do it? Because let's face it, those legacy systems are running priority services for your customers. Yeah. You have to find a way of making them more available.
That's really interesting, and I think that connects with another issue that I heard quite often in the interviews, which is this question of security. And how do you see security playing into this?
Well, security is a high agenda item, particularly when it comes to data, because people, and especially if it's personal data, then people are very keen to make sure the security is the right requirement. But again, we talked about this in one of our earlier videos, is the fact that you can make a system very secure, but then it becomes very hard to access. Mm-hmm. You have to make that balance between how accessible do you want it and how secure. So you need to define your data, have a good process, policy, ISO 27001 type data classification, so you can decide how secure that data needs to be, and then you can build the necessary firewalls up or the necessary security in front of it. It's certainly something you cannot dismiss. You have to be conscious of it. But I do believe it's a case of, like with most applications, you tier applications from an availability point of view, depending on what they're for. You need to do the same for your security. You know, how much ease of access versus how secure, and you have to make that business call as to what you want to do to make that happen. But there are ways of doing it. It's just a case of, you know, what you want to do with regard to the data that you have behind there.
Hi, my name is Nelson Phillips. I'm professor at Imperial College London, and I've been commissioned by SunGard to conduct a research project looking into the available enterprise. By available enterprise, we mean an organization whose systems, people, and processes are aligned to ensure 24/7 availability. We found a number of very interesting results. We performed both a survey on 450 CIOs across France, UK, and Scandinavia, as well as a set of in-depth interviews.